now adding a layer to the mixed numbers and improper fractions, so we're writing them as decimals. So we have to combine all these things. So let's stop. Let's forget about the mixed number for a minute, and let's just remember how to convert a fraction into a decimal. So if we're talking about 3 over 10 or 3/10, we already know that writing that as a decimal is like that, 0.3. That's your tenths place value, 3/10. And if we're writing 85 out of 100, we would write 0.85. So there's a little clue here. If there's only one digit after the decimal, then it's a fraction over 10. And if there are two digits after the decimal, it's a fraction over 100. So one digit equals 1 0, two digits equals 2 zeros. Okay, so that's the hint, and they talk about that in the book. So now we want to make this into a decimal. Well, the whole number doesn't change. So we keep the whole number the same, and we write this portion as a decimal. Same as over here. The whole number doesn't change, it's 2, and we write this portion as a decimal. So it's really about just taking out this in the line and putting a decimal there. Okay? Putting a decimal here, taking out this portion. 12.3, 2.85. Okay, so I just want you to see that connection. Okay, let's look at question 1. These are the answers for question 1, A, B, C, and D. So we have 3 and 4/10. So remember, all of these, the whole number stays the same. So the first thing to do is just write that whole number down. And then put a decimal, because the decimal represents the line of the fraction. Okay? And then whether or not that decimal or that fraction is over 10 or over 100. So if it's over 10, okay, it has a single digit. And if it's over 100, it has two digits. Watch that last one, it gets tricky, remember. So 3/4, 12 and 5/10, 8 and 45 100ths. Now this one is 46 and 3 100ths. Make sure that you don't just put this as your answer. That would be incorrect. That would be 46 and 3/10. But we are talking about 100ths, so there has to be two digits. All right, that place value. That's tenths, that's 100ths. All right, so 46 and 3/100ths. Okay, so question 1 is fairly simple. Just wanting you to basically rewrite these. Okay, so all we did was we took out the 100. Okay, we put that decimal. But remember, for these ones that are less than 10, you have to put that extra 0 in there. So that's going to trip you up from time to time. Let's take this one. That would be 8 and 45 over 100. So we just took out this part, added a decimal. Okay? All right, let's move on to question 2. Question 2 says write the denominator of the fraction part for the equivalent number. So basically, it just wants you to see, do you know what denominator to use? So 4.9. So 0.9, 0.9. There's one digit after the decimal, so that means it's going to be the tenths. So it's going to be 10 would be your answer, because that's what your denominator would be. For B, there's two digits after the decimal, so that means it's going to have 2 zeros in your denominator, so that's going to be 100. So it's only one of those two. It's either going to be one digit or two digit. So C says 15.08. 08, two digits, so that means there's 2 zeros in your denominator. And the bonus, 18.40, there's two digits, which means there's two digits in your denominator, which would be 100. Or if you took out that 0, because 0 is nothing, then you could say 10. So for this one, it's either 100 or it's 10, because 40 over 100 is the same as 4 over 10. So either answer would be correct. Okay, question 3. Question 3, we're going to do E, F, G, and the bonus. So it's important to remember that when we are converting decimals into fractions, all we're doing is taking the decimal portion and making that into a fraction. So the whole number stays the same. So in each of these examples, so 13.4, 17.06, 193.45, and 1007.04, the whole numbers stay the same. They don't change. Don't do anything with those. All you're doing is taking the decimal and converting it into a fraction. Okay, so this is what we just did. So the book is taking us through these steps, and now you already know how to convert 0.4 to a decimal. It's 4/10. You know how to convert 0.06 to a decimal. So it's really not difficult. Just because they're adding numbers, it can maybe be confusing. So if you just remember, the whole number stays the same, and you just convert the decimal, so 0.45 or whatever, 0.45, you're just converting this part into a decimal. You're just converting this part into a fraction, rather. You're just converting this part into a fraction, and you're converting this part into a fraction. Okay, so those are your answers for those 4 questions. So just look at the decimal, convert it to a fraction, and then just put the whole number in. Whole number stays the same. Okay, let's move on to, question 4. It's either hundredths or tenths. And whether or not there are 2 digits, it's hundredths. If it's 1 digit, it's tenths. You guys know that. And question 5 is just writing out the words. I'm going to leave you guys to do that. I want us to go into question 6, because now we're taking the improper fraction version of this and converting it into a decimal. Okay, so as long as you can convert mixed numbers and improper fractions, you'll be able to convert them to decimals. Okay, it's like 3 ways of writing the same thing. So let's look at question 6 together. I'm going to show you the simple way that really doesn't even require any math. So 74/10, how do we write that as the mixed number? Okay, how do we get there? I want you to notice something. All the numbers are the same, it's just where they're at. So my little trick version is to do this. Take this number and just put it here, and you will have that. And this is your correct answer. Once you have this, then later on they're asking us to make that into a decimal. But once you have this, you already know, okay, the numerator stays the same. Write this as a decimal, 4/10, okay, 0.4. So you can see the 3 ways of writing the same thing. But to get from here to here, it's that simple. Now, the math way of doing it would be to do some division. How many times does 10 go into 74? Well, it goes in 7 times. 10 times 7 is 70. So it goes in 7 times, and there's 4 left over. But if you want to be really, really simple about it, just move that 7 down. That's it. No matter what it is. If it's 68/10, just take the 6 and move it down here, and you have your answer. Now let's do the same thing with a fraction over 100. So let me erase this. And the example we have in the book is 625 over 100. Okay, same exact principle. Take the 6, move it down here, and you have 625 over 100. Now, let's convert it to a decimal. 6 doesn't change, and 25 100ths, you guys know how to write that as 0.25. So you can see how simple it is to go from one to the other, and just remember this little trick. Take the first number out, make that your whole number, and you have your correct mixed number. Okay, now let's move on to question 7. We'll use this principle to do these questions and convert them to decimals. Question 7, I wrote C, D, E, and F on the board because A and B they've done for us. So let's just talk about these. 41 over 10, so use my little trick. Take your 4 out, put it down here. Okay, that's your whole number, and you leave the 1 and the 10. Okay, so that becomes your mixed number, and then you convert that to a decimal. The 4 stays the same. You're just converting this portion okay, to a decimal 1/10, 0.1, okay, so 4.1. So it's the exact same method for each of these. So 642 over 100, take the 6 out, it becomes your whole number. It leaves you with 42 over 100. Okay, so we write that as 6, stays the same, 6 is always there, 0.42. So we're converting this into a decimal. Same thing here, take the 5 out, that becomes your whole number. You're left with 64 over 100, and 5 stays the same, okay? That's your whole number. You convert this to a decimal. This one, 808 over 100, same thing. Take the 8 out, it becomes your whole number. So that leaves you with 0.8 over 100. Okay, I wrote it like that for a reason. And that equals 8. Okay, now 8 over 100 is the same as 0.8 over 100. I want you just to see that. We don't write that like that because that's not how we write numbers. We don't write a number as 0.8, we just write it as 8, even though we know that's what it is. So don't get mixed up with this. Remember, 8 over 100 is 0.08. So it has to be 2 digits because there's 2 zeros. Okay, so that's the only one I can see being a little bit confusing, but the method is the same for all of these. Take the number, the first number, and take it out. It becomes your whole number. Okay, you're left with your fraction, convert it into a decimal, and you have your answers. Okay, let's move on. Question 8. Okay, question 8, probably the most confusing, not confusing, probably the most difficult question in these last few pages. So it is asking us to write the decimal they have here as an improper fraction. Okay, so there's a middle step you should do, which is first change it to a mixed number and then to an improper fraction. So I've written them out on the board, and we're going to talk about them. So this is E, F, G, and H, okay? Now, let's have a look. 70.8. If we were to write that as a mixed number first, we would write 70, okay, and 8/10. So how do I know that's what I write? Remember when we are writing out numbers, okay? So we write out 70 and 8/10. So if we were writing them out like with words. So when you do that and you say that in your head, 70 and 8/10, then think about what does that look like? 70 and 8/10. So that's step number 1. Okay, step number 2 is to convert that into an improper fraction, and they're asking us to write it either over 10 or over 100. So how do we know which to use? Well, our decimal tells us. So if it is a single digit, it's over 10, and if it's a double digit, it's over 100. Okay, so that's how we know which denominator to use. All right, so we have 70 and 8/10. We have 17 and 5. Oh, that should be tenths, I'm sorry. My bad. 17 and 5/10. We have 31 and 89 hundredths. And we have 90 and 4/10. Okay? So we got that step first. Now I know what you're saying. This is starting to look like a lot of numbers. It looks confusing, but just stay with me. So back to this one. First step, 70 and 8/10, okay, is written like this. Now in our previous example, what we would do is we take out the first number and make that our whole number. Okay, now, why doesn't that work in this example? Well, the reason is if we take out 7, we're still left with 2 digits over our denominator, and we can't have that. I know 0 represents 0, but in fractions it represents a place value, okay? So that means that we have to take out these 2, and that becomes our whole number, okay? So all we're doing here is we're taking the 70 and we're just attaching the 8 to the end of it, okay? So we're just taking 70, we're just putting the 8 on the end of it and putting that over our denominator. And we're basically doing that for all of these. So if we just want to take the math away for a minute and just basically rearrange numbers, we take 17.5, or 17 and 5/10, and we just take the 17 and we just put it up alongside our 5, and it gives us our improper fraction. Okay, we do the same thing with 31.89, 31 and 89/100ths. We just take the 31 and the 89, we put them side by side, it's over 100, and voila, we have our improper fraction. Now if I just took out the 3 and I put it here, I would have 3 and 189 over 100. I still have an improper fraction. That's why we're taking the 3 and the 1. Okay, so we take the 31, and that leaves us with 89 over 100. Okay, because 100 times 31 is 3100, plus 89 is 3189. So that's the math, but if we just want to rearrange numbers, this is how you do it. 90.4, 90 and 4/10. If we just take the 90 and the 4 and we put them together like that, over 10, we have our improper fraction. 9, our last question, there's a chart, 2 charts, and they just want us to be able to know that tenths and hundredths, that these, all of those examples, they want you to come up with the equivalent numbers. So they want us to understand that 3.8 is the same as 3.80, and that the fractions 38 over 10 is the same as 380 over 100. Like, these are all the same number, okay? They represent the same amount of something, even though they look differently. The only difference is the denominator tells us how many pieces we're dividing this thing up into. So in the book, or in the Khan Academy website, there are the things that we do there. They'll have like the square, and it's either divided into 10 or into 100. Now if I color in 2 of those things that are broken up into 10, or I color in 20 of the ones that are broken up into 100, they want us to understand that it's the same amount. Okay, it's the same amount of square that I'm coloring. So if I color in 2 of these, or they're broken up into hundreds, I didn't color any more. Okay, so this is the same thing. We didn't color any more things here. We still have the same amount. So whether this is divided into tens or into 100s, it's the same amount of things. So 38 over 10 and 380 over 100, okay, equal the same number, 3.8 and 3.80. Okay, they're the same thing. These are the same thing. Okay, so this question is just having you look at the tenth and go across the board and making it into the equivalent of what it would be in hundredths. Okay, and then the next one, they're giving you one of each of these things, and you have to work backwards and forwards. So whatever the hundredth is, basically you take off a 0, and if it's a tenth, you add a 0. All right, if it's a fraction like this, you make sure it has 2 digits after the decimal for the hundredths, and it only has to have 1 digit after the decimal for the tenths. So work through that chart. I think you'd be able to do that now. If you've had trouble with it, even easier now. So just remember those little tricks, how to make mixed numbers into improper fractions and back and forth, and how to take those and make them into decimals. Okay, and as we move on into other things, we're going to use these again. I think the next, let me grab the book here. The next section is, we're looking at place value and decimal fractions. Okay, so it gets actually gets easier before it gets harder. And then we're going to look at thousandths. Okay, so just another 0. Let's write it on here, 300, like that, over 1,000. Okay, that equals the same thing. All we did was add a 0. So we add a 0 here, we add a 0 to the denominator. So we're going to get into thousandths and then so on and so on, and getting into adding and subtracting. But guys, listen, as long like 10, 100,000, we're all talking about, there's different divisions of what we're cutting this thing up into. All right. So hopefully this little video helps. Go through those, make sure you understand that. I'm going to set up a little quiz for you guys. Hopefully you get this information and you get it locked in here, and we'll go from there. If you have any questions, please just reach out, email me, or send me a private message in the Google Classroom, and have an awesome day.